People who were targeted by murderers. Why did they target you? And how did you survive? They missed. That's about the only reason. It was a random act of violence. A man ran up behind me, put a gun to my head and shot. He flinched, or I did, and he missed by an inch. Blew out my left eardrum and burned my hair behind my ear. He ran off immediately after. Cops said it was probably a gang initiation thing. I have deafening tinnitus now and horrible anxiety in public. I'm not sure if it counts, but a few years ago in high school, there was this guy that used to trouble everyone by taking naked photos of them when they were changing after pep class. I happened to be one of his targets, so I reported him to my teacher, and eventually he got suspended for about a month and had to attend counseling sessions. One day I was at the bus stop waiting for my bus when suddenly I felt a push on my back and I fell onto the road. Luckily for me, the bus driver stopped the bus in time and I survived. However, I fell directly on my arm and it was fractured. Last I heard, he went to the juvenile center and no one ever had to see this devil again. It's not my story, but the story of a family friend. He was a well-respected lawyer and had a case against the Mafia. The evidence was substantial and he won the case. Multiple Mafia members went to prison, and almost immediately after the case wrapped he started receiving threats. A few weeks later, despite police awareness, he was run off the road by another car. He survived, but with massive trauma. Lost years of memory. He and his family moved states, and he is no longer able to work. It's a survival story, but not a win. My ex-boyfriend hired some guy from Chicago to murder me after I broke up with him for selling drugs to my younger sister. Fortunately, my ex and I both had a mutual friend who found out and had more pull with the attempted assassin. Both were Polish immigrants. Ex calls me up later and demands $2,000 from me because he didn't get what he paid for, as the hired gun wouldn't give a refund. I've posted about this before. I was in a really bad abusive relationship. He had many mental issues along with diabetes. This doesn't excuse any of it, as he was aware of what his body was doing, and he never got help. But it's important to know it didn't exactly come out of the blue. One night, he seemed bored and started trying to stick his feet in my face. I pushed them away, disgusted, and he exploded. It was a whole lot of action. He started by trying to choke me. I freed myself by grabbing a cat brush, the kind with the sharp metal points, and pushing it into his chest. He let me go, but pushed me to the ground and lifted his airsoft rifle and drove it to my head, like he was trying to cave in my skull. At the last moment he hesitated. I ran out of the apartment and called the cops. It didn't occur to me until later, when I was with a public defender documenting my injuries, that he had really wanted to kill me. I had bruising so deep they were black in color, in places I don't even remember him hitting me. He really would have, if something in him hadn't hesitated. This girl who thought knew me messaged me on Instagram. Even though we never met, we continued talking. Turns out she had a boyfriend who went to my school and he threatened to kill me if I didn't block her. He actually brought a knife to school that day too. Nothing happened to me, while the kid with a knife was expelled after a teacher saw the knife in his backpack. It technically wasn't a murderer or an assassin, but I was a combat medic in the army for 4 years. It was a small patrol in Helmand province, Afghanistan. We knew it was rather hot area for insurgent attacks and that's why we patrolled it so heavily, but we were moving through a small group of compounds and houses when we were ambushed by a small group of insurgents with AKs and RPGs. During the very start, a RPG landed 7 meters from me and threw me to the ground. A friendly soldier was also hit by the shrapnel from the RPG. While he was down, he was hit 2 more times by AK fire. I took a man and I dragged him back into a ditch we were taking cover in, while the other man covered us with the M249 BIP. We had to move, so I put him on my shoulders and carried him to a rather big pipe under a bridge. While I was trying to get his vest off, I noticed that I was now alone. The rest of the patrol had forgotten about us and moved in the compound for better cover. I didn't know where they were at the time, but I was trying to call on the radio for their position. But I needed to tend to the injured man while I was trying to stop the bleeding from the shrapnel. The 2 AK rounds were stopped by the body armor we wear on our plate carriers. While I was tending to him, I heard footsteps above me. I made a dumb decision. to tell out our squad's lingo, walk with the white rabbit, run with the red queen, and no one responded, so I knew it was enemy at that point. I pulled out my M9. My M4 was under the downed man. Because he rolled over it, a single man jumped down behind me and rushed me. We struggled for the gun for a couple of minutes, until I got my hand free, and pulled my bayonet, and swung at him. It cut his arm open pretty good, and started gushing blood very fast. I went to go stab him, but he grabbed my arm and we went to the ground with me on top. I pushed the knife down on him with him resisting, but I eventually got the knife in his chest after 5 to 6 minutes of fighting for his life. He slowly started squirming his legs and screaming, and I covered his mouth so any other insurgents heard him and came to help him. After I was sure he was dead, I went to start helping our downed man again. I kept calling on the radio for help, but it took 4 minutes for me to get a response from a British outpost, who sent out a MRAP and Warrior IFV to help. After I stabilized the injured man, I started feeling pain in my leg, and turns out, while fighting for the knife, he stabbed me in my leg with a AKM bayonet, which was still in my leg. I pulled it out and threw it on the ground, and just about at that time the British QRF arrived, and a medic and a specialist carried me and the downed man to the MRAP. I found out later that our patrol squad had abandoned us and retreated back to the American outpost. The commander of that patrol was court-martialed 3 months later. I was almost murdered. If it wasn't for my manager, I would have been. My sister set me up on a date with her friend. I ended up having to work the weekend, so I cancelled. The date, went out with someone else, and afterwards invited him to her apartment. Right before they went inside, someone killed them both with a gun. It turned out to be a jealous neighbor of the girl who she was also messing with. That could have been me if she decided to let me in 40. I was targeted because I saved a victim not long ago. A friend was being chased by a creep that probably had those kind of intentions, being my friend a young beautiful female. I just protected both of us. The same guy that attempted the assault, I thought, assaulted me right next to my house and failed to shoot. Instead, he shot my right leg and crashed 2 ribs. 1 month after that, police found out that he was one of my ex-boyfriends under the line of, if she is not mine, she can't be with another. Having served and then come out and got big into crime, it helps you prepare for it. It makes you constantly paranoid, and it still does. Like if a random guy stares at me across the street, it instantly clicks and adrenaline kicks in. I'm always on alert, and only time I can ever relax is when I'm home and my house is locked down and secure. I have had 10+ attempts on me for what I was doing, and if it wasn't for me being prepared and pre-trained in these situations, I wouldn't be alive. If I was dopey and a mental potato, I would be dead. If you're gonna do stuff that's going to make people come after you, you better be prepared. Preparation is key. This was when I lived in Cleveland, the kind of nice part, but really they are all just oases in a sea of drug and gang neighborhoods. No one thinks of Cleveland as the gang-filled city, but seriously, live there for 5 minutes. We didn't get in the news, but we had issues the whole time I've been alive, up until moving away finally a year ago. There had been a string of violent rapes of women out jogging in the mornings before sunup. That neighborhood was desperate to appear hip and millennial and had built up a bunch of wannabe cute shops and such all along one road, attracting the young who want to live in cool areas, artsy, etc. But none of them understood what they were really moving into, and as a result, they were all just ripe for the picking, because they were oblivious and thought that it wasn't really the inner city if it had a chippetal next to a dozen of cute buy my homemade sweater / yak butter / organic produce shops in it. So this rapist had gotten 4 girls so far, snagged them off the sidewalk, beat them, raped them, and left them bleeding on the ground. I had a new dog at that time. I thought I needed one for protection, and it had been 2 years since my husky girl died. I ended up with a big red standard poodle, 6 years old, with a history of aggression and attitude problems. I love that guy. He's still with me. I do dog training, so managing a dog like that is nothing, and I figured that a dog with a hair trigger is probably good for a young lady living alone anyway. We lived in an apartment, and the only way for him to potty was for us to go on 10 walks a day. Basically, I never skimped on those walks. We would walk miles for at least 2 of them, and practice our behavior on the way. Well, this morning it was dark, 430 am. and I had only had my boy for about a week and a half. We were doing well. On our third block also of the walk, I didn't notice that a guy stepped out behind me, either from behind a hedge of one of the nice houses, or between this spa building and the next one. All I saw was his hand and the butt of his gun come up in my right periphery, I assume for a pistol whipping. My dog noticed though. He turned around, savage like I had not seen him before, and I've never seen him like that since either. I'm pretty sure that first snap got the guy straight in the dick. Good dog. He was holding his gun the wrong way around, by the barrel, luckily, so we didn't get shot right away, and my dog must have startled him so badly that he didn't even think to do anything except run. My dog chased him 3 blocks while I chased after them because I was terrified I was about to lose my new dog. Eventually, my dog came dancing back to me. Think poodle prancing like a little frou-frou doggy dancer, because that is exactly what he did, like a frilly silly thing. So proud of himself, and I just hugged him. I guess that guy learned that just because a poodle looks like a silly pom-pom pillow prince doesn't mean he won't eat you for dinner. Unfortunately, as much as I would like to just joke it all off, losing us and being humiliated must have enraged him. He did get another girl that morning, in front of a house we could see from my apartment porch. It was the most violent attack he'd done so far. The woman almost didn't survive. He beat her so badly she ended up in a coma for a bit according to the news. Dragged her between 2 cars parked on the street, raped her there, dragged her into the bushes of the house, and left her for dead. That was his last attack, at least. The cops finally caught him before he could go again. I lived in Cleveland for several more years before I finally witnessed a murder and had to watch cops show up late with cheeseburgers from McDonald's hanging out of their mouths to tell all of the witnesses from 3 households that we all imagined the exact same thing. They took so long to reply to all of our frantic and detailed calls that the murderers had time to clean up the body, the shells if there were any, and let the rain wash away the blood. They drove off in 2 separate cars with the body in one of the trunks, not even speeding. Because why would they? No one was coming to stop them. I decided to get out then, and was gone finally 2 years later once I managed to buy a house half the state away. Don't let anyone try to sweet talk you about Cleveland, or defend their cops. The corruption, laziness, and resultant crime is out of control. They don't even have the decency to be ashamed of their own uselessness and incompetence. Does a school shooting count? I was not in the same part of the school. I evacuated with my class and got home safely a few hours later. Had I been in the wrong place at the wrong time, I just as easily could have been one of the victims. He was and is a deluded, violent, angry, lonely demon who couldn't stand a world where the rest of us weren't dragged into his demented hell pit. No way in hell. Life has recovered more or less to what it was, and 22 months on, Stoneman Douglas is 0% his world, and 100% the world I know are 17 fallen, want it to be. I was on an almost school shooters list. Me and my friend tried to befriend a kid with pretty badass pictures. He was known to have horrible anger management issue, always got in a lot of trouble, and was somewhat infamous, but we thought he deserved at least a couple friends. The plan was to just kinda sit with him at lunch, and apart from that carry on with our lives as normal. But being he had very little social skills, never had friends, and no boundaries, he didn't know how to handle it. Very sad. He would come up to us at bad times while I was at practice, talking to girls or teachers, and would message us online day and night. We tried to have a talk with him about boundaries and how friends give each other space etc, but this just made him feel rejected and infuriated him. He became more obsessed and more persistent. Around this time I got my first girlfriend and started hanging out with her at school, so my other friend was the one who had handled it more than I did. A few weeks later found the kid beat the shit out of my friend. He got stopped by other kids and the campus police officers. He was expelled and sent to a school for people with disabilities. I was honestly relieved he would be somewhere more equipped to help him. After that I kinda just forgot about it. About 3 months later I got called into the administration office and walked into a room with the dean of students and a police officer. I started panicking because in those days I smoked a lot of weed and thought I might have gotten caught. I was informed that the kid's mom found a list in his room of maybe 10 people that he wanted to shoot. We were number 1 and 2. His parents were divorced, and I guess the dad had guns, so the mom panicked and called the police. The officer asked me if I was scared. I said no, I thought the kid was the kind to make empty threats out of anger and wouldn't go through with something like that, but my friend was terrified. I don't know what came of that from a legal standpoint. Last I heard, the kid got help and figured it out and is going to college. He actually messages me happy birthday every year. I don't respond.